"Get out of here, you're just jealous!" the exhausted mother screamed, trying to drag the German Shepherd away from the newborn's bedroom door. The dog whimpered, broke free, and ignoring the command, jumped with its paws onto the crib railing, barking directly into the face of the sleeping baby. The mother rushed to expel him, furious, but when she looked at her daughter's pale little face, she realized the silence in the room was deadly. The mother's scream, echoing in the dark hallway, was a mix of fury and the exhaustion accumulated from sleepless nights. Since Aurora's arrival just 2 months ago, life in the house had been turned upside down, and the German Shepherd, a giant with golden fur and melancholic eyes, who was once the joy of the house, had transformed into an obsessive and terrifying shadow. Night after night, the animal scratched at the baby's bedroom door, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of the mother's sanity. His barks, deep and incessant, were directed at the crib, an incomprehensible rage that daily cemented her conviction that the dog harbored dangerous jealousy, a palpable threat to little Aurora's well-being. The decision to give him away, painful but seemingly inevitable, had already been made, hanging like a dark cloud over the house. In the early hours of that morning, the scene repeated itself, but with even greater intensity. The dog's guttural bark, previously muffled by the door, now resonated inside the room, deafening. The mother, her nerves frayed, had woken to the sound of scratches more violent than usual, followed by a low, persistent growl. She barely managed to get out of bed, her body heavy with sleep deprivation, and the dog was already at the door, forcing his way through with his snout. "No, Kaiser, no, stop it!" she whispered, her voice choked, trying to hold back her pet's invisible leash, as he seemed to have forgotten all his obedience. But the German Shepherd, ignoring her completely, lunged at the door, which gave way with a creak. A shiver ran down the mother's spine. Never, in all the years Kaiser had been with them, had he disobeyed so flagrantly, so desperately. His behavior was erratic, almost wild. She grabbed him by the collar, trying to pull him out, but the dog's muscles were rigid, tense, as if he were fighting an invisible force. He whimpered, a sharp, painful sound, and somehow broke free from the mother's grip, running to the crib. The mother watched in slow motion, the German Shepherd jump with his front paws onto the railing, his eyes fixed on the baby, his bark now a howl of alarm, almost a cry for help, directly into Aurora's sleeping face. The mother's fury erupted. It was too much. The animal's sick jealousy had crossed all boundaries. How dared he bark so close to her daughter, startling her, perhaps even hurting her? She rushed towards the crib, her eyes burning with rage, ready to tear the dog away, to take him away forever. But then, something made her stop. A detail, a silence that shouldn't exist. Aurora, the 2-month-old baby, was motionless. Her chest wasn't rising and falling. Her little face, usually rosy and serene in sleep, was strangely pale under the dim light of the nightlight. The dog's bark, previously an irritating background noise, now seemed a warning, a deafening alarm that the mother, in her exhaustion and blindness, had ignored until that moment. The silence, a cold and suffocating presence, filled the room, louder than any bark. It was a deadly silence. The mother's heart froze. The words, dangerous jealousy, dissolved into icy terror. The dog wasn't barking to scare. He was barking to wake her. He was barking because the baby wasn't breathing. Time stopped. The world contracted to that room, that crib, that silence. The mother felt her blood run cold, adrenaline exploding through her body. The German Shepherd, still with his paws on the railing, now whimpered a different sound, a desperate lament, pushing his snout against the railing as if trying to reach little Aurora. Panic, raw and overwhelming, seized the mother, who threw herself over the crib, her trembling hands reaching for her daughter. What seemed like an attack revealed itself to be a desperate act, and the mother, in her shock, could barely process the terrible truth unfolding before her eyes. The silence in the room was deadly, and the sound of the dog's bark, once a torment, was now the only hope. The icy terror of that silence cut the mother like a sharp blade, tearing through the veil of her exhaustion and rage. "Aurora!" she whispered, her voice caught in her throat, a thin thread of panic. Her trembling fingers touched her daughter's tiny chest, waiting for the familiar movement of breath. Nothing. The baby's body was limp, her lips slightly bluish, her eyes closed in a sleep that seemed too deep, unnatural. The German shepherd, Kaiser, still whimpered beside the crib, pushing the railing with his snout, a palpable urgency in his movements. The mother, in a fit of desperation, picked up her daughter, shaking her gently, calling her name with increasing intensity. "Aurora, please, wake up." The father, who had been awakened by Kaiser's unusual barking and the mother's muffled scream, rushed into the room, his sleepy expression quickly replaced by petrifying shock as he saw the scene. The mother, pale and wide-eyed, the inert baby in her arms, and the dog, a restless giant, circling the crib with a continuous lament. "What happened?" he exclaimed, his voice hoarse with apprehension. The mother couldn't answer, only pointed to her daughter, a guttural sob escaping her throat. The father, a quick thinker in crisis situations, took Aurora from his wife's hands, his own fingers searching for a pulse, a sign of life. The baby's heart was weak, almost imperceptible. The basic first aid training he had taken years ago, now a distant memory, resurfaced with frightening clarity. He laid the baby on the floor on a soft rug and began chest compressions, delicate but firm, interspersed with small breaths into her mouth and nose. Every second was an eternity. The German shepherd, who had previously been the target of the mother's fury, now watched the scene with painful intensity, his eyes fixed on the baby, a mix of anguish and expectation. He no longer barked, but his whimpers were a somber chorus to the unfolding drama. The mother, kneeling beside her husband, her hands clasped in silent prayer, felt the world spin. The image of Kaiser, the dog she was about to abandon, now projected itself in her mind as a warning beacon, a premonition she had ignored. Guilt, a thousand-tentacled monster, began to corrode her soul. "It's not working," the father murmured, his voice choked with despair, sweat dripping down his forehead. The baby remained motionless, her face pale, her lips more bluish. With each passing second, hope diminished, slipping through their fingers like sand. It was then that, as if propelled by an invisible force, Kaiser approached again, pushing his snout against the immobile girl's face. It wasn't an aggressive push, but a gentle, repeated touch, almost a silent call. The mother, for an instant, feared the dog would hurt her, but the urgency in his eyes, the delicacy of his gesture, made her hesitate. And then a miracle. A faint, almost imperceptible gasp escaped Aurora's lips. Then another, a little stronger. The father stopped the compressions, his eyes fixed on his daughter. Her chest slowly began to rise and fall. A weak, hoarse crying sound filled the room. It wasn't the vigorous cry of a newly awakened baby, but a sound of life, a hymn of relief. The mother collapsed in tears, clutching her daughter, pressing her against her chest. The father, exhausted but immensely grateful, embraced them both. Kaiser, for his part, lay down beside the crib, his head low, his eyes still fixed on the baby, but with a serenity that had not been seen in him since Aurora's arrival. The ambulance siren, still distant, began to be heard, breaking the silence of the early morning. The father, his voice still trembling, had already called the emergency number, describing the situation with impressive clarity despite the shock. The mother, cradling Aurora, looked at Kaiser. The dog, whom she had labeled as jealous and dangerous, had been the first to notice. He had fought to alert them. He had somehow participated in the resuscitation with that gentle touch, almost a kiss of life. The image of the animal barking furiously at the crib transformed in her mind. It wasn't anger, it was desperation. It wasn't jealousy, it was a warning. The understanding of the gravity of the situation and the dog's crucial role hit her with full force. The knot of guilt in her stomach tightened even more. The tension in the room had not diminished, only transformed from panic into a chilling apprehension of what was to come. The ambulance approached, its headlights tearing through the darkness of the street, promising help, but also the uncertainty of the diagnosis. What had happened to Aurora, and how did Kaiser know? The mother, clinging to her daughter, felt that the world, her perception of reality, would never be the same. The deadly silence had been broken, but a new mystery presented itself, as profound as the darkness of that dawn. The race against time to the hospital was a succession of blurred flashes of blue and red lights, the shrill sound of the siren hammering in the mother's ears. Aurora, now wrapped in thermal blankets on the ambulance stretcher, received oxygen through a small mask, her eyes half closed in a medicated sleep. The father beside her held his daughter's tiny hand, his face marked by exhaustion and fear. The mother, in the back seat, felt like a spectre, her mind still processing the sequence of events that had almost stolen their daughter. The image of Kaiser, the German shepherd she had condemned, pushing his snout against Aurora, repeated itself in her mind, a poignant reminder of her blindness. In the pediatric emergency room, the medical team acted with precision and speed. Aurora was taken to an emergency room, and the parents were left in a cold, impersonal waiting room. The hours dragged on, each minute a torment of uncertainty. The father tried to call family, but the words were lost in his throat. The mother, in silence, relived the past months, every bark from Kaiser, every scratch at the door, every pleading look she had interpreted as aggression. Guilt devoured her, a slow and corrosive poison. Finally, a doctor, a middle-aged man with tired but kind eyes, came to them. "Baby Aurora is stabilized," he began. And the relief that flooded the parents was so intense it almost knocked them over. "We managed to reverse the apnea. She's breathing on her own now, but we'll keep her under observation for a few nights." Apnea. The word hung in the air, strange and terrifying. The doctor explained that infant sleep apnea is a condition where the baby stops breathing for short periods during sleep. It can be central, when the brain doesn't send the correct signals to the breathing muscles, or obstructive. In Aurora's case, it seemed to be mild central apnea, but without intervention, it could have had very serious consequences. "It was a miracle you found her in time," the doctor continued, his voice serious. "Many cases don't have a happy ending. Something or someone must have alerted you." The mother and father exchanged a look. The father, his voice choked, replied, "Our dog, our German shepherd, he alerted us. He barked and scratched at the bedroom door every night, but we didn't understand why." The doctor raised an eyebrow, an expression of surprise on his face. "An animal, you say? Incredible. Sometimes they have an instinct that we humans can't explain. It's as if they sense a change in breathing patterns or heart rate." The mother felt a lump in her throat. The dangerous jealousy she had imagined was, in fact, a protective instinct so profound it bordered on the supernatural. She thought of Kaiser, left at home, probably as distressed as they were. The father, noticing his wife's concern, touched her shoulder. "I asked the neighbor to look after him and the house. He was very agitated when we left." The conversation with the doctor continued, focusing on the care Aurora would need at home, an apnea monitor, instructions on how to act in future episodes, and the need for follow-up with a specialist. But for the mother, the most impactful information wasn't the medical terms or procedures. It was the confirmation of Kaiser's heroism, The dog, whom she was about to give away to another home, had been her daughter's guardian angel, the only one to perceive the invisible danger lurking in the crib. Shame and gratitude wrestled in her chest, a silent and overwhelming battle. The mystery of how Kaiser knew, how he could sense, only deepened. It was more than instinct. It seemed to be an ancient wisdom, an acute perception that transcended human understanding. As Aurora rested in her hospital bed, the parents knew that their lives had changed forever, not only because of their daughter's condition, but because of the revelation of their faithful companion's true nature. The tension of the moment had slightly diminished with the news that Aurora was stable, but a new layer of apprehension and curiosity settled in, one that would lead them to unravel the secrets held in the melancholic eyes of their German shepherd. The return home, 3 days later, was a mix of relief and a palpable tension that hung in the air like a dense fog. Aurora, now equipped with a small apnea monitor clipped to her ankle, slept peacefully in her crib, the soft beep of the device with each regular breath, a sound that would once have been irritating, now the sweetest of melodies. The house, once a sanctuary of peace, seemed to have transformed into a minefield of anxiety. Every sound, every silence was scrutinized by the parents with an intensity that bordered on paranoia. Kaiser was there waiting for them at the door, a soft whimper and a tail that wagged with unusual restraint. His eyes, once full of an incomprehensible urgency, now reflected a calm vigilance. The mother knelt, embracing the German shepherd with a strength she never imagined she possessed. "Forgive me, Kaiser," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was so blind, so unfair." The dog, in response, licked her hand, a gesture of silent forgiveness that broke the mother's heart. The father, observing the scene, felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had always believed in Kaiser's goodness, but the depth of what the animal had done surpassed all expectations. The household routine now revolved around Aurora and the apnea monitor. The parents took turns on watch, their eyes fixed on the device, their ears alert to any change in their daughter's breathing pattern. But, surprisingly, they weren't the only ones keeping guard. Kaiser had resumed his post, no longer scratching at the door, but lying silently in the hallway, his ears alert, his snout pointed towards the baby's room. The mother, though grateful, still felt a slight chill at the intensity of the dog's vigilance. It was as if he carried a burden, a responsibility that frightened her in its magnitude. "He's incredible, isn't he?" the father commented one night as they watched Kaiser lying on the doorstep, a silent sentinel. He knew. Somehow he knew what was happening. The mother nodded, her voice low. "Yes, but it's almost unsettling. How can he be so attuned? It's as if he's been waiting for this." The apprehension in her voice was evident. Her gratitude was immense. But the almost supernatural nature of Kaiser's instinct still disturbed her. It was as if he held a secret, an untold story that propelled him. Kaiser's presence, once a source of discord, was now a central element in Aurora's safety. If the monitor issued an alert, the dog was the first to react, standing up, whimpering softly, drawing the parents' attention even before they could process the sound. Once, the monitor triggered a low battery alarm. Kaiser immediately began barking at the device, as if scolding it for its failure. The mother, who would once have reprimanded him for barking, now watched him with a mixture of fascination and admiration. His behavior was no longer that of a jealous animal, but that of a tireless protector, a silent guardian with a mission. The tension, however, did not completely disappear. The threat of apnea, though monitored, was a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads, and Kaiser's obsession, though now understood as protection, still carried a weight. He wasn't just a vigilant dog, he was a haunted dog, driven by something deeper than mere animal instinct. The mother felt it. There was a sadness in Kaiser's eyes, a melancholy that seemed to carry the weight of an ancient pain. This perception made the mother question the animal's past even more. Where did this wisdom, this almost human dedication, come from? The house had become a home of gratitude and vigilance, but also of a latent mystery. A silent question that the parents knew they needed to unravel to fully understand their four-legged hero. The German Shepherd, once a problem, was now the center of an enigma that needed to be solved, not just out of curiosity, but to honor his undeniable bravery. Days turned into weeks, and the young couple's home became a center of research and observation. The father, with his analytical mind, delved into scientific articles on infant sleep apnea, while the mother, driven by a visceral need to understand, devoured accounts from parents who had faced the same condition. They learned about the different types, the risk factors, the alarming statistics. Each new piece of information, though essential for Aurora's safety, added a layer of fear to the already present tension. The fragility of their daughter's life, with every breath, was a reality that haunted them. Meanwhile, Kaiser, the German Shepherd, maintained his unwavering vigil. His presence, once a source of stress, was now a strange comfort, an extension of the parents' own anxiety, but also a silent promise of protection. They began to observe his patterns more closely, noticing details that would once have gone unnoticed, overshadowed by irritation. Kaiser had a nightly ritual. After Aurora fell asleep, he would lie not at the bedroom door, but a few feet from the crib, at the entrance, where he could hear every sound, feel every movement. His eyes, even in the dark, seemed fixed on the small, sleeping figure. The mother noticed that Kaiser no longer barked indiscriminately. His barks now were specific. If Aurora coughed lightly, he would merely raise his head, observing. But if there was a silence that was too prolonged, an interval between breaths that exceeded the normal, he would whimper softly at first, then with more insistence, until one of the parents came to check. It was as if he had learned to differentiate the normal sounds of a baby's sleep from the signs of danger. Kaiser's intelligence, his capacity for discernment, was something the mother could no longer ignore. It wasn't just instinct. It was a form of cognition, of memory, of a deep purpose. One afternoon, as the mother was reading an article about pulmonary development in babies, Kaiser, who was lying at her feet, suddenly raised his head. His eyes widened, and he emitted a low, almost inaudible whine. The mother, accustomed to his signals, looked at Aurora's apnea monitor. The breathing indicator was intermittent. Before the audible alarm could sound, the mother rushed to the crib. Aurora was pale, and her breathing was indeed shallow. With a gentle touch, the mother managed to rouse her. The monitor's alarm sounded a second later. Kaiser, satisfied, lay down again, but his eyes continued fixed on the baby. The mother felt a shiver. Kaiser had perceived the danger even before the technology. The monitor, with all its electronic precision, was slower than the German Shepherd's sense of smell, hearing, and perception. This experience solidified the mother's belief that Kaiser was more than a pet. He was a guardian with a sensitivity and purpose that transcended common understanding. The tension in her mind began to transform from fear into an unsettling fascination. The father, equally impressed, began to record Kaiser's alerts, comparing them with the monitor's data. On more than one occasion, Kaiser had reacted to small variations that the monitor would only detect later, or that wouldn't even trigger an alarm, but which, in the parents' retrospective view, were moments of weaker breathing. It was as if the dog had a more sensitive, more human alert threshold than the device itself. The house, despite the constant vigilance and persistent threat, began to develop a new harmony, a synchronized dance between humans, technology, and animal. Kaiser was now an essential part of Aurora's protection team. But the question of how he had acquired this ability, this almost sacred dedication, continued to echo in the parents' minds. There was a mystery in his eyes, a secret in his past that seemed to be the key to understanding his extraordinary behavior. The mother, in particular, felt a pressing need to unravel this enigma. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a desire to honor Kaiser's silent sacrifice, to understand the depth of his loyalty. The thriller of their domestic life had transformed into a quest for a hidden truth, an adventure to unravel the heart of their dog. That night, the parents' trust in Kaiser was reinforced in a way that no other situation had managed. It wasn't just about apnea, it was about the totality of Aurora's safety. The dog wasn't just a problem detector, he was an omniscient guardian with a perception that transcended technology and human capacity itself. The incident, which could have shaken their faith, actually cemented it. But with that faith came an even more pressing question. Where did this ability come from? This dedication, this almost prescience? The father, as he returned to bed, thought of the doctor's words about animal instinct, but this seemed to go far beyond instinct. It was as if Kaiser had a memory, a previous experience that propelled him. There was a story, a hidden past behind those melancholic eyes, and the parents felt a growing need to unravel it. The mystery of Kaiser, Aurora's guardian angel, had deepened, and the adventure of unraveling it was now an unpostponable mission. The false threat of saliva and the blanket, unveiled by Kaiser's keen perception, served as a catalyst to deepen the mystery surrounding the German Shepherd. The next morning, as Aurora slept peacefully and Kaiser watched, the father sat at the kitchen table, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's not normal," he began, breaking the silence. "A dog being so perceptive. It's not just instinct. It's as if he knows exactly what to look for, what to avoid." The mother, who was preparing coffee, nodded, her mind still processing the previous night. "I had the same feeling. It's as if he's been trained for this, or lived this before." The last sentence hung in the air, laden with a dark implication. The father stood up, walking to the window, watching Kaiser lying in the garden, his eyes fixed on the house. "He has that sadness in his eyes, doesn't he? A melancholy that isn't from a dog who has always been happy." It was then that the idea, which had been maturing in his mind, took shape. "We need to find out his past," the father declared, turning to the mother. "Kaiser wasn't born with us. We adopted him from a shelter 3 years ago. He was already an adult. Who was his family before us? What happened to them? There might be a connection." The mother's eyes widened. The father's suggestion resonated with Kaiser's strange wisdom. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the origin of his dedication, the source of his prescience. The decision was unanimous. They needed to unravel Kaiser's story. It was a debt of gratitude, a way to honor the animal who had saved their daughter's life and who, somehow, seemed to carry such a heavy secret. The adventure of unraveling Kaiser's past began on the internet. They scoured the adoption documents they had, looking for any information about the shelter, the former owner's name, the date of entry. Records were scarce, as is common in many animal adoptions. The shelter's name was Path to Home, located in a town a few hours away. The first step was to try to contact the shelter by phone. The father spent hours on the phone, dealing with busy secretaries and bureaucracy. "Privacy policies are strict," he explained to the mother, frustrated. "They can't just provide information about former owners. It's to protect families and animals." The tension of the search began to set in. It wouldn't be easy. Kaiser's past was well guarded. The mother, driven by a fierce determination, suggested they make the trip. "We can't just rely on phone calls. We need to go there in person." Look into the eyes of someone who knew him. Maybe they'll remember him, something. The idea was bold, but the urgency in her heart was greater than any hesitation. They needed answers. They needed to understand why Kaiser was the way he was. The trip was scheduled for the following weekend. The father organized the logistics, asking a trusted friend to look after Aurora and Kaiser. The emotion was mixed. The excitement of a hunt, the hope of unraveling a mystery, and the apprehension that what they found might be painful. They knew that Kaiser's story would likely not be simple, given the depth of his trauma. The adventure, which was once confined to the domestic sphere, now expanded into the unknown, a journey to unearth the truth. The search for Kaiser's past became as high a priority as the vigilance over Aurora herself. With each step, the tension increased, for they knew that the truth, when revealed, would have a profound impact on their lives and on their understanding of the unwavering German Shepherd. The trip to Path to Home, the shelter from which Kaiser had been adopted, was a silent journey laden with expectations. The father drove, his eyes fixed on the winding road, while the mother, in the passenger seat, mentally reviewed the few details they had about the dog. The name Kaiser had already been given to him by the shelter, his estimated age, his breed. Beyond that, only emptiness. The mystery of his past was a burden they both felt, a debt to be paid. Upon arriving at the shelter, they found a modest but well-maintained place, filled with barks and meows echoing in the air. The reception was a simple counter, where a young volunteer, with a gentle smile, greeted them. "We've come for information about a German shepherd adopted from here about 3 years ago. His name was Kaiser," the father explained, his voice charged with contained urgency. The volunteer consulted an old computer, her nails typing slowly. "Kaiser, German shepherd, 3 years ago. Records from that time are a bit incomplete." Frustration began to set in. As the mother had predicted, it wouldn't be easy. The volunteer explained that the shelter had undergone a management transition and a minor fire in the physical archive a few years prior, which had compromised many of the old records. "We have the basics, that he was rescued from a street situation, that he had no microchip, and that he was adopted by you. But there's no information about the previous owner, nor the reason for the initial surrender, if there even was one." A dead end. The tension mounted, suffocating the hope that propelled them. The father tried to argue, explaining Aurora's situation, Kaiser's importance in their lives, the need to understand the dog's behavior. The volunteer, though sympathetic, was bound by the rules. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't provide information we don't have, and even if we did, the privacy of former owners is protected." The mother, however, did not give up. She looked at the volunteer, her eyes pleading. "Isn't there anyone here who's worked longer? Someone who might remember Kaiser? He's a very distinctive dog." The volunteer thought for a moment. "Well, there's Mrs. Anna. She's the founder of the shelter, and still comes here to volunteer a few times a week. She has an incredible memory for animals, but she's not here today." A small glimmer of hope opened. The mother took Mrs. Anna's contact information, promising to call. It was a step, however small, towards unraveling the mystery. The drive back home was once again silent, but now with a new layer of determination. The father, though disheartened by the lack of progress, felt his wife's unwavering energy. "We'll get it," she said, her voice firm. "Kaiser deserves to have his story told." They knew they were in a race against time, not just to satisfy curiosity, but to understand the depth of the trauma Kaiser carried. The adventure of unraveling his past was proving to be a true thriller, full of obstacles and dead ends. But the reward, the truth behind the melancholic eyes of the German Shepherd, was worth every effort. With each clue, however faint, the tension increased, the promise of an imminent revelation hanging over them. The search for Anna, their last hope, became the next chapter of their intricate investigation, a crucial step to unravel the secrets of their silent guardian. The call to Mrs. Anna was made the next day, a mix of nervousness and anticipation in the air. Mrs. Anna's voice, on the other end of the line, was gentle but firm, that of someone who had dedicated her life to animals. The mother explained the situation, Aurora's story, Kaiser's heroism, and the urgent need to understand the dog's past. There was a long silence on the phone, a silence that seemed to carry the weight of old memories. "Kaiser," Mrs. Anna finally said, her voice lower, almost a whisper. "Yes, I remember Kaiser. How could I forget? He was a very special animal with a tragic story." The mother's heart skipped a beat. The word tragic confirmed her suspicions, but also opened a door to a pain she didn't yet comprehend. "Please, Mrs. Anna, tell us," the mother pleaded, her voice choked. Mrs. Anna hesitated again, as if reliving a painful past. "Kaiser wasn't rescued from the street, as the record says. He was surrendered by a woman, a lady named Helena. She was in a terrible state, devastated by grief. She couldn't care for him anymore, said he reminded her too much of." What had happened? The mystery began to unravel, but with each layer, a new darkness was revealed. "What happened, Mrs. Anna?" the father asked, taking the phone from the mother's hand, his voice grave. "Helena was a single mother," Mrs. Anna began, her voice laden with sadness. "She had a baby, a boy named Leo. Kaiser was his guardian, his companion. They were inseparable. But one day Leo stopped breathing in his sleep. Apnea. Exactly like your daughter from what you described. Kaiser was there in the room, but he couldn't alert her in time. Or perhaps he tried. But Helena didn't understand. Guilt destroyed her. And Kaiser was never the same." Mrs. Anna's words fell upon the parents like a lightning bolt. Apnea, exactly the same condition. Kaiser's trauma, his obsessive dedication, his capacity for discernment. Everything began to make sense, a painful and frightening sense. The German Shepherd carried not just an instinct, but the memory of a loss, the guilt of an event he couldn't prevent. His behavior wasn't jealousy, nor even just protection. It was a silent penance, a life's mission born of pain. "She surrendered him because she couldn't bear to see him," Mrs. Anna continued. "She said he looked at her with a sadness that accused her, that reminded her of her failure as a mother. And he, in turn, seemed to carry the guilt for not having been able to save Leo. It was one of the saddest stories I've seen at the shelter." The mother felt tears stream down her face. The image of Kaiser, his melancholic gaze, now gained a new and poignant meaning. "Do you have her contact? Where can we find her?" the father asked, his voice choked. The need to speak with Helena, to understand the complete story, to somehow alleviate Kaiser's pain, was overwhelming. Mrs. Anna hesitated again. Helena moved to a small town in the countryside, trying to start over. She's a reclusive person, still very hurt. I don't know if she'll want to relive all this. But Mrs. Anna, moved by the story of Kaiser's new family and the urgency in their voices, agreed to try. She would give them Helena's address and phone number on the condition that they be gentle and understanding. The mystery had been partially unraveled, but the truth was darker and more painful than they could have imagined. The adventure of unraveling Kaiser's past had led to a story of tragedy and redemption, and the tension transformed into a deep empathy for the German Shepherd and the woman who had lost so much. The next step would be the hardest, confronting the past in its rawest form. With Helena's contact in hand, the parents' apprehension reached a new level. The call wouldn't be easy. How to approach a mother who had lost a child and who, because of that pain, had given up her faithful companion. The mother, with a heavy heart, was responsible for the delicate task. After a few attempts, Helena's voice answered, sounding fragile and distant, like an echo of a past she was trying to leave behind. "Mrs. Helena, my name is, and my husband and I are calling about a German shepherd," the mother began, her voice soft, trying to infuse as much gentleness as possible. There was a silence on the other end of the line, dense and heavy. "Kaiser," the mother added, the dog's name coming out as a whisper. Helena's reaction was immediate and painful. A deep sigh, followed by a muffled sob. I don't want to talk about it," she said, her voice broken. "It's a past that I tried to bury." The mother, sensing the raw pain in Helena's voice, knew she needed to be sincere but cautious. "Mrs. Helena, we understand, but Kaiser, he saved our daughter's life. She also suffers from sleep apnea. He saved her because he knew, and Mrs. Anna told us about Leo. We believe Kaiser's story is intrinsically linked to yours, to the pain you shared." Another long silence. The mother could almost feel Helena's internal struggle, the battle between the desire to forget and the need to confront a past that somehow had manifested itself in the present, through Kaiser. Finally, Helena spoke, her voice still fragile, but with a hint of curiosity and just perhaps, a glimmer of relief. He saved a child. He succeeded this time? The question, laden with belated hope, revealed the depth of her own trauma. The mother, feeling she had found an opening, confirmed with emotion. "Yes, Mrs. Helena, he succeeded, and we would very much like to visit you, if you'll allow us. We'd like to understand the full story, not just out of curiosity, but to honor Kaiser, and so you know that his sacrifice was not in vain." Helena hesitated once more, but the prospect that Kaiser, the dog she had seen as a painful reminder of her loss, had finally fulfilled his mission, seemed to be a balm for her wounded soul. "Come," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "I'm in Serenetown. It's a long drive." The father, who was listening to the conversation, gave the mother a thumbs up. The distance didn't matter. The trip to Serenetown was planned for the following weekend, a pilgrimage in search of answers. The anticipation was palpable, mixed with a deep sadness. They knew they were about to delve into a story of unimaginable pain, but also of extraordinary redemption. The thriller that began with a bark in the early morning was about to reach its emotional climax. The road, winding through hills and valleys, seemed to lead them not just to a distant town, but to a portal to the past, a past that had shaped Kaiser and that now, unexpectedly, intertwined with the future of their own family. The tension of waiting was almost unbearable, for every mile traveled brought them closer to a truth that would change their lives forever. Helena's small house, nestled in a quiet valley, was a refuge of silence and melancholy. The garden, though well-maintained, seemed to carry the stillness of an ancient sorrow. Upon entering, they were greeted by Helena, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and eyes that, despite being deep and tired, still revealed an intrinsic kindness. There was a fragility about her, an aura of someone who had endured immense suffering. The tension was almost palpable in the air, but the mother and father sat down, ready to listen. "Thank you for coming," Helena began, her voice low and hoarse, as if she rarely used it. I don't usually talk about this, but knowing that Kaiser, that he finally fulfilled his promise, is a relief I didn't think I'd feel again." She paused, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if reliving every moment. "Leo was my everything, my only son. He was just 3 months old when it happened." Helena's story unfolded slowly, each word laden with a raw emotion that made the parents hold their breath. Kaiser was a puppy when we adopted him, a gift for Leo. They grew up together, inseparable. Kaiser was Leo's guardian from day one, always followed him, always protected him. I trusted him more than anyone. Helena's eyes welled up, and she made a visible effort to maintain her composure. Leo had sleep apnea. We didn't know it at first. No one warned us. It was a rare condition, and the doctors only discovered it after what happened. Helena's voice faltered, and she needed a few seconds to compose herself. He would stop breathing for short periods, but I always woke him up. I had a monitor, but it didn't always work perfectly. I trusted my instinct. And Kaiser. Then she arrived at that night, the night that changed everything. It was a cold night. I was exhausted like all mothers of babies. Leo had had a busy day, and I finally put him to sleep. Kaiser was in the room, as always, lying beside the crib. I remember hearing a bark, a different bark, more urgent, but I was so tired, so overwhelmed, that I misinterpreted it. I thought he was just agitated, maybe thirsty. I reprimanded him, asked him to be quiet. The mother felt a shiver. The similarity to her own experience was frightening. Helena continued, her voice choked with pain. I turned over in bed, trying to go back to sleep, but Kaiser didn't give up. He started scratching at the door, barking louder, whimpering. I got up, irritated, and took him out of the room, closing the door. I told him to be quiet, that he would wake the baby. I left him in the hallway, barking, pleading. Helena's tears began to fall, silent and uncontrollable. When I woke up the next morning, it was the silence that scared me. A different silence. I rushed to the room. Leo. Leo was pale. He wasn't breathing. He had stopped breathing during the night, and I didn't realize. Kaiser tried. He tried to alert me, but I pushed him away. I prevented him from saving my son. Helena's confession was a lament, a pain that had never healed. The parents in shock could barely speak. The scene she described, the pain she felt, was a mirror of the very tragedy they had almost lived. The tension in the room was suffocating, mixed with a profound sadness. Kaiser's story, the guardian angel, was unfolding, but at a devastating emotional cost. Helena breathed deeply, trying to suppress the sobs that shook her body. Guilt consumed me, she continued, her voice a thin thread. But Kaiser, he also changed. After that day, he was never the same. He became reclusive, sad. He didn't eat properly. His eyes held a melancholy that broke my heart, but also accused me. It was as if he knew he had failed, that he hadn't been able to fulfill his mission to protect Leo. The parents listened in silence, every word from Helena resonating with the image of Kaiser in their own lives. That melancholic gaze, the incessant vigilance, the urgency in his barks. Everything now made painful and complete sense. Helena continued, her voice gaining unexpected strength, as if the narrative itself was healing her. I would see him lie near the empty room door of Leo, whimpering softly, as if in mourning. I tried everything to help him, to help myself, but the image of Leo and of Kaiser, reminding me of what I had done, of what he couldn't do. It was too much. It was then that Helena revealed the crucial point of the story, what transformed Kaiser's pain into a life's mission. One night, I was in Leo's room crying, holding one of his little outfits. Kaiser came in and lay beside me. He put his snout in my hand, and I felt a strange warmth, a determination coming from him. It was as if, at that moment, he made a silent vow. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt it. He swore that no baby would die under his watch again. Helena's revelation hit the parents with the force of an emotional tsunami. Kaiser's silent vow, his pain, his guilt, transformed into an unwavering purpose. The German Shepherd was not just a dog with a keen instinct. He was a being who carried the trauma of a loss, the responsibility of a perceived failure, and the promise of redemption. His obsession was not jealousy, but a dedication born of a broken heart, a solemn vow made to a baby he couldn't save. "I knew I couldn't keep him," Helena confessed, tears streaming again. "Every time I looked at him, I saw Leo, I saw my failure, and I knew he needed a new chance, a new baby to protect, to fulfill his vow. I took him to the shelter, my heart in pieces. I told Mrs. Anna he was a special dog, that he needed a family with a baby. I didn't want him to lose the chance to redeem himself." The mother and father were in tears, completely overcome with emotion. Kaiser's story was an epic of pain, loyalty, and sacrifice. The mother's guilt for having misjudged the dog was overwhelming, but her gratitude for his dedication was even greater. The father, his voice choked, asked, He succeeded, Mrs. Helena. He saved our Aurora." Helena looked at them, a sad smile and immense relief in her eyes. "I knew he would. He had a purpose. He had a mission." The tension in the room dissolved, replaced by a deep connection between the three people, united by the story of an extraordinary dog and a shared tragedy. The revelation of Kaiser's past was not just an answer to a mystery. It was a healing, a validation, and a bridge between two families, two lives, linked by the fragile thread of a baby's life and the unwavering loyalty of a German shepherd. The emotional climax had been reached, and the weight of the truth, though painful, was also liberating. The silence that followed Helena's narrative was not empty, but filled by the weight of an overwhelming emotion. The mother, unable to contain the tears, squeezed the father's hand, feeling her own pain mix with Helena's. The guilt, which had already been corroding her since the night of Aurora's apnea, now deepened into an abyss of remorse. How could she have been so blind, so unfair to Kaiser? She had judged the animal who carried the pain of an unimaginable loss, the dog who had transformed into a guardian angel for her daughter, all because of a trauma she didn't even know about. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Helena," the mother managed to say, her voice choked with sobs. "I reprimanded him. I pushed him away. I thought he was jealous, that he was dangerous. I was about to give him away." The confession was a heavy burden, but it was the truth. Helena, with a look of understanding, touched the mother's hand. "I understand. I did the same. It's easy to misinterpret what we don't understand. Pain blinds us, but Kaiser, he never gave up on his mission." The father, equally emotional, felt immense gratitude for Helena for sharing her story. It was an act of courage, a gift that allowed them to see Kaiser not just as a pet, but as a being with a deep soul and a sacred purpose. "We will take care of him, Mrs. Helena. We will love him, and he will have the chance to fulfill his vow every day with Aurora." The father's promise was sincere, coming from the bottom of his heart. The German shepherd, who had been the center of so much conflict and mystery, now was a figure of unquestionable heroism. He was not just a dog, he was a guardian, a redeemer, a symbol of loyalty that transcends life itself. The mother felt a deep connection with Kaiser, one that went beyond the love for a pet. It was a connection of souls, united by the fragility of life and the strength of protection. In that small room, the distance between the two families dissolved. Helena, for the first time in years, felt a glimmer of peace. Knowing that Kaiser had finally fulfilled his mission, that Leo's pain had not been in vain, that there was a purpose for the dog's sacrifice, was a balm for her wounded soul. She handed the parents an old, time-yellowed photograph. It was Leo, a smiling baby, in the arms of a puppy Kaiser. "He was always a protector," Helena whispered, a sad smile on her lips. The drive back home was different. There was no longer the tension of the search. but rather a serenity tinged with sadness and a profound gratitude. The image of Kaiser, his melancholic gaze, was now interpreted in a new light. He was not a haunted dog, but a dog with a mission, a silent hero who had transformed his pain into an unwavering strength. Upon arriving home, Kaiser greeted them with a restrained wag of his tail, his eyes fixed on their faces, as if asking if the mission was complete. The mother knelt, embracing him with a strength that conveyed all her regret, her gratitude, and her unconditional love. "You are our hero, Kaiser," she whispered in his ear, "our guardian angel." The German Shepherd, in response, licked her face, a gesture of forgiveness and acceptance. The bond was forged, indestructible, born of tragedy and tempered by redemption. The house, once a field of tension, was now a sanctuary of love and understanding, with Kaiser at its center, the guardian of a safer future. The revelation of Kaiser's past completely transformed the dynamic of the house. The tension that once hung in the air, fueled by incomprehension and fear, gave way to an atmosphere of profound gratitude and respect. Kaiser, the German Shepherd, was no longer the problem, but the central pillar of Aurora's safety, an irreplaceable family member whose purpose was now understood and honored. The mother, once the most skeptical and fearful, became Kaiser's greatest advocate. His melancholic gaze, which once disturbed her, now evoked a deep empathy. She treated him with a gentleness and reverence that went beyond affection for a pet. She spoke to him, explained things, as if Kaiser were a silent confidant, capable of understanding every word, every emotion, and somehow he seemed to understand. Kaiser's vigilance, which was once seen as a frightening obsession, was now embraced by the parents with unwavering trust. They not only tolerated his constant presence in Aurora's room, but encouraged it. When the apnea monitor beeped, it was Kaiser they watched first. His eyes, his ears, the slight tremor in his body. These were the true indicators of danger, more reliable than any technology. They began to actively involve him in Aurora's care. During diaper changes, Kaiser was nearby, observing. During playtime, he lay a few feet away, a silent guardian. If Aurora cried, he whimpered softly, alerting the parents. It was as if Kaiser had been promoted to a position of honor in the family, a co-protector. The father, who always had a strong bond with Kaiser, felt his connection deepened by this new understanding. He spent long hours stroking the German Shepherd, whispering words of thanks, acknowledging the burden Kaiser had carried for so long. They installed a comfortable bed for Kaiser next to Aurora's crib, a place of honor where he could maintain his vigil unobstructed. The dog accepted the gift with a silent dignity, his eyes fixed on the baby, an eternal promise in his gaze. The house, once a stage of tension and conflict, became a home of harmony, united by a love that had been forged in adversity. The nights, though still laden with the threat of apnea, were now faced with a new strength, the certainty that they had an extraordinary ally. Friends and family, who once found Kaiser's behavior strange, now listened to the story with admiration and astonishment, understanding the depth of the animal's loyalty. The mother, in particular, felt that her own life had been transformed. She had learned a lesson in humility, of not judging by appearances, of looking beyond the obvious. Kaiser was not just a savior, he was a teacher, a guide. His dedication was a constant reminder that love and protection can take many forms, and that pain can be transformed into a sublime purpose. The adventure of understanding Kaiser had become a journey of self-discovery for her. Life continued, with its challenges and joys, but the family faced everything with a new resilience. The presence of Kaiser was a constant comfort, a silent guarantee that Aurora would always be safe. He was the vigilant heart of the house, the link between the tragic past and a future of hope and love. The tension that permeated the house had metamorphosed into a calm and shared vigilance, a testament to the power of a silent vow. Years passed, and little Aurora grew, transforming from a fragile baby into a vibrant child, full of laughter and energy. The apnea monitor, which was once a constant presence, was gradually retired, but the vigilance of Kaiser, the German Shepherd, never diminished. He continued to be Aurora's shadow, her silent guardian, his melancholic eyes now filled with a deep peace and serene acceptance, but with the spark of his promise still shining. Aurora, now 5 years old, knew no life without Kaiser by her side. For her, the big golden-furred dog was more than a pet. He was her friend, her protector, her confidant. She snuggled with him on rainy afternoons, told him her secrets and laughed when he licked her face affectionately. Kaiser, in turn, responded with a gentle wag of his tail and a look of unwavering devotion. The mother and father observed the interaction between the two with a constant mixture of admiration and a gratitude that never waned. Kaiser's story, that of Leo and Helena, was told to Aurora in a gentle version, adapted to her age, teaching her about loyalty, the importance of listening, and the depth of love that transcends pain. Aurora knew that Kaiser was special, that he had saved her, and treated him with the same respect and affection as her parents. The house, which was once a battlefield of conflicting emotions, was now a sanctuary of love and understanding. The memory of Leo, though painful, was no longer a burden, but a part of the tapestry of their lives, a reminder of Kaiser's courage and the resilience of the human spirit. The German Shepherd's presence was a constant link to the past, but also a bridge to a future of hope. Kaiser aged gracefully, his steps a little slower, his muzzle flecked with white, but his vigilance remained intact. Even on the quietest nights, he still lay near Aurora's room, his ears attentive to any sound, his eyes, though closed in sleep, always seeming alert. The promise he had made to himself and to Leo was an intrinsic part of his being, a vow he would carry until his last breath. The threat of apnea, though diminished with Aurora's age, never completely disappeared from the parents' minds. It was a constant reminder of the fragility of life and of the extraordinary intervention that had saved it. And amidst that memory was Kaiser, the silent hero, the guardian who had transformed his pain into a life's mission. On a sunny afternoon, Aurora was playing in the garden, Kaiser lying at her feet, observing every movement. The mother, sitting on the porch, looked at the scene, a gentle smile on her lips. Life was full of uncertainties, but Kaiser's presence was a constant. He was living proof that compassion and sacrifice can create indestructible bonds, and that love, even born of loss, has the power to redeem and protect. The German Shepherd, once a mystery, was now a living legend, a testament to the power of a silent vow and the extraordinary capacity of a loyal heart. And so, under Kaiser's eternal vigil, the family continued their journey, a chapter of love, loss, and redemption, always remembering the four-legged hero who transformed pain into life.